My guest at this time is Van Hipp. He's a U.S. Army veteran. He's chairman of American Defense International Incorporated, and he's the former Deputy Assistant Secretary of the U.S. Army. He's also the author recently of The New Terrorism, How to Fight It and Defeat It. And he's also the author, in addition to that, of an op-ed that's gone somewhat viral here around Veterans Day, as he issued a letter to his own children, but made it an open letter that was published at foxnews.com about why Veterans Day is important and what it ought to mean to all of us. And Van, thanks so much for being with us, and thank you for your service.
Greg, appreciate it, and good to be with you.
Well, this was initially a letter to your kids. Why'd you decide to make it an open letter?
Well, I was actually some of the folks at Fox suggested that. They said, "Look, we like it, but we think that if you did it as an open letter, other people could share it with their kids and their grandkids." And we've been very humbled and pleased by the response we've gotten because, I mean, look, I believe that right now we live in a free country and we are safe because of our veterans. And it's important that young people understand not only what it means to be an American, but how we got here, Greg. And so what I've tried to explain to my kids and to others is that you have to go back and look at history. And the reason we even have a federal government in the first place was because the states came together to provide for the common defense of the American people. That's the main reason we have a government. And it is our veterans who, going back to to when this country started, to the founding of this country, they're the ones who've been on the front lines to keep America safe and secure so that we can be free.
Why do you think there's less understanding of veterans and why we should appreciate them? You talked about understanding history, and you talk about that in the column as well, in the letter, about how education needs to make this more of a priority. So how is it affecting our country that more people don't have this grasp on history?
Unfortunately, I don't think we emphasize American history and civics in our schools like we used to. And I was particularly troubled by a study that I read about back in the spring. I believe it was USA Today actually published it, and found that 22% of millennials weren't sure if they knew what the Holocaust was, and 67% had not even heard of Auschwitz. When I read that, I said, we've got a problem. We've got a real big problem in this country. I believe that education is a national security issue. And, Greg, don't forget, and I was reminded of this, something President Reagan said, that freedom is never more than just one generation away from extinction.
Now, your family has deep roots in this country, back to the point where your ancestors fought in the American Revolution. A lot of families may not go back that far. So how do you explain this so we all share the same heritage, even if everybody doesn't go back that far?
Well, I told my kids, first of all, it was important for them to understand their heritage. We all have a heritage, and all of us, our ancestors, came to this country for a reason. And so many of those reasons were they wanted freedom. That could be freedom, just basic security. It could be religious freedom, you name it. But in our family, our family fought, and they fought on the right side of the American Revolutionary War. And there were actually a number of our ancestors were at the Battle of Cowpens along the South Carolina, North Carolina border. That was a time when America's back was against the wall, and that was the old rugged frontiersmen and the Scots-Irish and the French Huguenots of the backwoods of South Carolina who really turned the tide in the American Revolutionary War. But we've all got a heritage. We all have a history. And we all have people ancestors who came to this country yearning for something. And it's important to understand that over the years, it is our veterans who have fought for and been willing to die for this country to ensure that those freedoms are passed on to the next generation.
Now, Van, in your job as a Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Army, you focused a lot on personnel, and so you got to meet a lot of people, find out why they wanted to join the service, and what did you hear from them?
A lot of it is you have such a spirit of American volunteerism, and that's what I call it. And we see that today in young people who are joining the military. They want to keep this country safe and secure. On the home front, they realize we have challenges internationally. And in my letter, I also talked about it's great to see people in the private sector who also exemplify that American volunteer spirit, who are getting involved to help our veterans. I talked about Ben Patton, the grandson of General George S. Patton, who's doing so much to help many of our vets who are dealing with PTSD. Michael Reagan, President Reagan's son, has been heavily involved We're the Reagan Legacy Foundation, helping for scholarships for our veterans and their kids. And so we need, it's encouraging to see that. That is the true American volunteer spirit.
We're talking with Van Hipp. He's chairman of American Defense International. He's a U.S. Army veteran, former Deputy Assistant Secretary of the U.S. Army. Van, I'm just going to read the last two paragraphs here and then ask you a couple more questions. It says, God has blessed America over the years by giving us men and women who put America above self, put on the uniform, and are willing to give their lives for their country. Today we live in a free country and are safe because of our veterans. This Veterans Day, honor our veterans. Go to a Veterans Day parade and bring your friends. Tell them what it means to be an American and what our veterans have done for them. Most importantly, thank God for giving us men and women such as these. This is the way to honor our veterans on Veterans Day. Extremely well said. And for those who, even if it's not Veterans Day, if you see someone wearing the hat that it makes it very clear where they have served, or perhaps they're clearly dealing with an injury that they suffered in combat, what do our veterans want most from us?
I think they want to be appreciated and know that their service is appreciated, and they also want to see this new generation continue that same spirit of volunteerism, so that these freedoms that we enjoy today as Americans can be passed on to future generations.
And sometimes folks might feel a little skittish about going up to someone who they can clearly see as a veteran, but they don't know them, and they might not feel comfortable talking to somebody they don't know. So to help ease that, what does it feel like when somebody says thank you for your service to you, or what have you heard from others when somebody will approach them and thank them?
It makes you feel good, and I've talked to other veterans. It makes them feel the same way, and it encourages them that the regular citizenry really does appreciate what veterans have done over the years, not you as an individual, but what veterans have done over the years to keep this country safe so that we can be free.
And we're obviously in a very divided environment in this country politically right now. Do you still feel like there's some unity over admiration and respect and honoring of our veterans, or do you fear that, as a result of the fractious nature of our politics, is at risk as well?
If the veterans can't pull us together, who can? And I go back to, why do we have a country? When people who say we spend too much on defense or we spend too much on our veterans, they don't know what they're talking about. When John F. Kennedy was president of this country, 52% of all federal spending was for national security. Today it's only 16%. I go back to, why do we have a federal government in the first place? The first and primary function is to keep us safe and secure. So, but I am hopeful, but I'll be even more hopeful when we truly treat education as a national security issue and start teaching history and civics again in our schools like we used to. And because since education is a national security issue, if we can get that right and get that back on track, I'm very hopeful for the future.
Van, we'll call time there. Thank you so much for your time, and thanks for writing the letter.
Thank you.
Van Hipp is chairman of American Defense International Incorporated. He's the former Deputy Assistant Secretary of the U.S. Army, and he's the author of a new column at foxnews.com, an open letter to his children that's really for all of us to help us understand the importance of this day, Veterans Day. I'm Greg Corombos reporting for Radio America.